Hi, my name is Michael Hollett, and I'm going to give an economics undergraduate level tutorial demonstration on how we can use economic theory to explain why the UK population and wage have evolved as they have done over the past 750 years. If you look here, you can see we've got a graph showing the real wage and population in Britain from 1260 till 2000. The real wage, shown here in orange, represents the wage adjusted for inflation. As you can see from 1260 to 1800, it fluctuates a bit, but overall remains pretty constant. However, from 1800 to 2000, there's a sudden big sharp increase and increases very, very quickly. We get very fast growth here. Similarly, with the population shown in blue, it's a bit stagnant and there's a little bit of growth from 1260 to 1800. However, once we get to 1800, there's a big sharp upturn and increases very fast here as well. In economics, this is known as hockey stick growth because the growth lines take the shape of a hockey stick, with the handle representing the slow stagnant bit and the end of the hockey stick representing this very sharp upturn growth. Economists of the 19th century tried to provide answers as to why in the years prior was there no wage growth and no increase in living standards. One of these economists was called Malthus. He came up with the idea of the Malthusian trap. Malthus lived from the end of the 18th century to the start of the 19th century, and his idea of the Malthusian trap dictated that in the long run, living standards can never increase. When Malthus was alive, most of the population were mostly farmers, and he theorized that if there's a technological change that increased the productivity of the farmers, this would lead to an increase in the output. And this increase in output would then lead to an increase in income, which would therefore cause an increase in living standards. At the time, most of the population were living on subsistence levels. Subsistence levels is where people have barely enough to survive, and it's the lowest possible level of living standards before they die. So, at the time, you've got to remember that there's a lot of high child mortality. There's a lot of women that died at childbirth. There's a lot of diseases, and people weren't very healthy. And there's not a lot of food to go around. So, if there was an increase in productivity and increase in income that led to more food and resources being around, people are going to become healthier, which means that more people are going to survive. This therefore leads to an increase in population. So, now that we have a larger population, this actually means that there's going to be more labour. However, this also means that the average amount of output per work is going to decrease. This is because of this concept of diminishing average product of labour. This is where the average output that each worker produces decreases as the number of workers increase. This is obviously if we increase the amount of labour or the amount of workers, we're going to get an increase in the amount of output. However, this increase in the amount of output is going to be relatively smaller than the increase in the amount of labour. As you can see here, when the labour is 30, this produces an output of 20. However, when the labour is 60, it doesn't actually produce an output of 40, it produces an output of 35. The reasons for this can be conceptualized with ideas such as if you've got a farm and then you double the amount of farmers on it, you could say that they're going to produce more crops, but the farm could easily get quite congested, and then it takes a while for the farmers to maneuver themselves across the farm. They might get in the way of each other. They might actually have to borrow tools. It's just going to they're just overall going to become less efficient. Additionally, if there's different parts of land can have different levels of fertility, so different parts of land can be more fertile. If you've got this massive farm with massive plots of land, we're going to assume that the 100 farmers all take up the 100 most fertile spots of land. However, when this labour force grows, the additional farmers are only going to be taking up less fertile spots of land. So overall, this means that the overall quality of fertile land is going to decrease on average, and then overall, the amount of output on average is going to decrease too. So, you've got less output on average per worker, and this is going to lead to less income per worker. This then consequently leads to a fall in the living standards, and they would fall until they return to the subsistence levels. So, Malthus's Malthusian trap basically says that in the short run, living standards can increase. However, as this would cause population growth, diminishing average product of labour means that they would soon return to subsistence levels, that is, the living standards. This means that in the long run, living standards will remain constant, but population growth can happen very slowly. So, Malthus says that in the long run, living standards can never increase. But as you can see, the real wage in the 1800s is much, much less than what it is in the 2000s. So, the real wage is often an approximation, can be used as an approximation for living standards. So, why is it Malthus was so wrong? Well, Malthus was correct for his bit from the 1800s and before, and his theory does make a lot of sense. But what he failed to do, he failed to anticipate how great the technological change in the Industrial Revolution was, which was ahead of his time. Basically, if we know about the Industrial Revolution, there was such great advancement in technology that they used such powerful machines relative to what was used before. Farmers went from using hand shovels to big powerful machines that could do all the work for them. So the technological change was so great, they managed to offset this concept of diminishing average product of labour. This allowed UK workers to escape the Malthusian trap. Thank you very much for listening.